have a red button instead of a blue one.
It's 11:59 at Radio Free America. This is Uncle Sam with music and the truth until dawn. Right now, I got a few words for some of our brothers and sisters in the occupied zone. The chair is against the walls. The chair is against the walls. John has a long mustache. John has a long mustache. It's 12 o'clock, Americans, another day closer to victory. And for all of you out there on or behind the lines, this is your song.
And welcome everybody to our Daily Gun Show. We come to you live every weeknight at midnight Eastern, and we talk about guns for a while. So this is episode 1002. We've been doing this show for a few years now. We do it every single weeknight, so we're on episode 1000 something. Right now we have Charles Heller joining us here from Tucson. Thanks, Charles, for joining in.
All right.
And then I've got links out to something like 40 people tonight. And as always, this is a panel discussion, so we'll see who shows up, and the topics will kind of come up as they go. On Mondays, we talk about behind the scenes, and that's why I've got the screen blown out like this for you right now. So I wanted to explain to Charles, and I figured there's no point in explaining it, as Charles would say, narrowcasting to one person. So what we've got going on here is a couple of different things. I invited Charles and 40 other people into something called the gun tube chamber, and that's the thing that's wiggling around on the screen now. I won't do it too much because it'll become that mirror effect. That's an online service offered by GunTube. Mike created that service a couple of years ago now, and now that YouTube no longer offers a live place for more than one people to hang out in a room, GunTube is an option for that, and it's free, and he lets us use it. We can have up to 30-something people. I think we've had over almost 20 people in a room at one time, which is a little bit more than YouTube used to give us. There's some other features and stuff, but that's where Charles and I are. Now I've got a YouTube screen over here on the very far right. That's the live broadcast that's going out. I'll close that in a second because that's just to give you some perspective or some reference points in space. We've got the YouTube video going out. That YouTube video is being streamed by this. This is the back end of the YouTube's thing. So all I have to do here is push a button to say live. I'm going to go ahead and get rid of that screen so it's a lot less confusing. But now we've also got this program running, and this is a piece of software on my computer, and this software is called XSplit, and this software is allowing me to share the room with Charles and I, and however many other people show up to the chamber tonight, it pipes that video, or that stream I should say, up into YouTube through this panel, and then this is what the audience is seeing out there. Now I'm also taking the feed from YouTube and bringing it back through XSplit, and on the screen we're seeing the conversation that people are having on the tech side of it over here. And then I'm also able to put in this little advertisement for Ghost and Clover's project, where they're selling these stickers or these postcards, I'm not sure, that they're going to sign up at SHOT Show as a way to raise some funds for their trip to SHOT Show. And then there's some stuff you can win if you grab one of these. So it's something that we can do, and I've just got a URL there that I'm linked to, and actually I can turn that on and off down here. I can turn off these elements, I should say, down here. So I'm just kind of explaining that that's how we're now running the show. And that was just, I don't know if it helped or not, but that's what I'm looking at on my screen. I am going to quit screen sharing over here, and that should make it a lot simpler for everybody watching and for Charles. And we'll get into the topic of today's show, which I sent out in the email, is let's talk about two-way media at SHOT Show, since that's about to come up here again. And I forgot what I put in the email. I thought it was pretty concise, but it was opening it up here. What we have watched change versus what we can change. And Charles, I think, is a great person to start the conversation off. When did you start going to SHOT Show?
19, probably 92, 96, I guess.
Would that have been from? Okay, so would that have been
What?
from the radio show as a representative of the radio show or some other?
Right. Yeah. Right. Yeah, around 92. Because I started. No, no, it wouldn't have been the radio show. It'd have to be after 99. So originally, my first trip to SHOT was probably 2002, 2003 or so, I think.
And
Well, I
then
think I'd been there before that, but the show started in '99, so it'd have to be within a couple of years afterwards. So yeah, 2002, 2003, probably my first time.
and then when you were doing the show, your radio show, just so that people know what we're talking about again, so that people aren't familiar. Charles is a host of a couple of radio shows, but the one we're talking about is Liberty Watch America Armed and Free, two shows that air on Sundays here in Tucson, and those started how many years ago?
20 and a half. Well, Swap Shop started 20 and a half years ago, and Liberty Watch and Armed and Free started about 18 years ago.
So when you started with those, that's when you started your shows. However, you had been in the radio business before that. So did you already have like press credentials, I guess is my question, before you started your show?
No, I did not.
Okay.
I originally got to SHOT on my credential with Liberty Watch, which they had to do some checking around. And they didn't just give me or grant me. They had to figure out that I really was a radio program. And then once they did that, they granted me the credential. And then re-credentialing every year has been very easy. All they look up is that you've had a credential in the past. They go to your website, make sure you're still currently doing what you said you were doing, and then they give you your credential.
Now, when you say they, you're talking the people who run
This
the
is it.
SHOT Show for NSSF each year.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. So, and I say that way because that's a thing. It's NSSF run SHOT Show, but they also have a managing company, I guess you could call it, like whatever manager to run the SHOT Show, and then the parts of SHOT Show are actually run by different elements. So that changes over the years, and their qualifications for media have not been consistent. So when you started in '99, that was I'm talking and clicking as we type here. So on the main screen, I don't know if you're watching the YouTube video. I should probably screen share for your benefit if I can do it this way. I think it'll work this way. And this way you can see what I'm looking at is I just have a bunch of the SHOT Show locations down. So when you first went to it, was it in Georgia?
No, it was in Vegas.
Okay, so you might have gone 2000, and then it went to New Orleans, then Vegas, then Orlando, and that's when it went to Orlando like 3 times. Then kind of went back and forth ping pong between Orlando and Vegas, and now it's just stuck at Vegas until 2025. But
Yeah, I never went to any other show but Vegas.
okay, so then my question is, you didn't have press credentials for Liberty Watch or anything. When you went to SHOT Show, you kind of already alluded to it. They needed to check your, I guess, validity of your credentials. I don't know how to call it.
Right. Yeah, they first wanted a letter from the radio station that said I worked there, and I said, well, I don't work there. And they go, well, then you can't have a credential. I go, wait a minute. There's all kinds of radio shows where the people that run the show don't work there. What are you talking about? And I argue with them a little bit.
Oh, that's super
What
interesting.
do you mean? Well, they went, what do you mean? And I go, what do you mean, what do I mean? You think everybody in the world has a radio show works for the station? They don't.
You're going to think I
And
scripted this.
No, and so I finally said, why don't you just look on the website? My show is archived there. You can see that you can look on the radio station's website and see that the program's there every week. Why don't you just figure it out? And they went, we'll get back to you. And I said, fine, get back to me. And a day later, they got back to me and said, oh, your credentials approved. I said, that's wonderful. And because I'm media, I don't have to pay to get in, which is good.
Well, no, that's, I think, an element, because it's $300 to get in.
Oh, I didn't know how much it was, but, why would I give, God bless the SHOT Show, but why would I pay them to get in if I'm giving them free media? If I'm giving them free attention, I mean, for goodness sakes, and it's good for the members. So it's not a freebie they're giving me, really. They're really letting me in so that I'll cover them.
Well, okay, so now let's get into it. So one of the things, like, and when I wanted to chat about, or my effort here, you know what I've been trying to do over the years. When I first got into this, was more like 2097. I got into the internet. 2004, 2005 is when I finally said I'm doing this full time with gun websites, and started the Tuesday meetings and stuff. So when I started going to SHOT Show in 2005, I was going into it as a person who, I don't know what I felt like. I felt like I had scammed the system and figured out a loophole in order to be in the industry. But then I was also fully aware that I was offering, what's the word, like insight to the people that were not being represented. So at the time in 2005, forums were the big online place to congregate, the social platforms of the day. Because of the speed of the internet and the amount of time people spent online, the way they used the internet, that we weren't on phones yet. We were on computers, and we would check them at lunch, periodically throughout the day. So forums lent themselves to the pace and the type of internet conversations that were happening back then. So it was also a low-speed internet. We didn't have broadband throughout the entire country yet. So conversations that, remember, happened cross country, across the nation, across the continent, they weren't high speed yet, so there weren't a lot of videos. It was a lot of pictures, and it was a time when I was just actually looking right now on a project. I was using a 3-megapixel camera back then, so whatever type or size, I don't remember off the top of my head, but whatever the file size was, that was a big picture. Full-size picture coming out of a digital camera would have been, manageable, but challenging for the internet. Having large pictures would have been pointless because people couldn't download them. So just thinking about some of the stuff that's been going on since 2005, my goal going forward is not to continue to just be an observer. And then after a while, I felt like I was part of the industry. And after a while, I felt like more than being part of the industry, I was part of the new breed, the new whatever, like the new regime, or not, that's a shitty word, the new generation, I guess, of media. And then a little while later, I figured out that there's more to it than that. There is no end to this. There is no, you've accomplished it and you're done. So as I've gone throughout the years to SHOT Show, I've gone through amazement and awe and frustration and ultimate excitement and ultimate frustration. I don't know that, it's gone all over the place. And we're sometimes at the whim of stuff. We've sometimes just done some really stupid things for strategy and stuff, but at other times we've done things just awesome and keep the we've done some great things as an industry, and we've done some dumb things as an industry. But as I look back, 15 years now, this will be our 15th year at SHOT, there's just so many things that we've witnessed, and we've been involved in the change from one thing to another, from digital or from standard to digital, from still to video, from video to stream, from internet websites are just a business card online or a postcard, to interactive forums, to the next best thing, to our salvation, to a waste of time, to and then back to a valid thing. So these things change, and the industry adapts, the industry accommodates, and the industry is got valid self-interest. So it's doing things not because it's told to, unless it has to. We have a unique industry because we have different regulations than some. But for the most part, our industry adapts, and our media has influenced and requested or required in some instances that adaptation, but it's never been with intent. It's never been sat down and no one ever said, we're going to use VHS or beta. There was never that decision made. Those decisions were only made in hindsight. So as we go forward into our 15th one, I want to see what we can do, being aware, to go forward with some intent. So what Charles just brought up there was a big summary of my introduction to the show here. So what Charles brought up there, though, with his initial story there, with his press credentials, with the management of the show for NSSF back in the years, is very similar to ours. When we first started going to SHOT Show in 2005, I can literally just unplug Charles's talk there and just take out the Liberty Watch and put in our website, because we basically had the same conversation. They said, oh, well, how do we know that it's your website. And I'm like, well, I can show you 6 different ways that it's my website. And what they had been dealing with in 2005 was a fear of cameras. They did not want cameras that shot. I'm not sure what their deal is with Charles, but like I say, there was a significant cost to go to SHOT Show, and it's not to be prohibitive. It's probably to cover. It's one of the largest shows. It costs a lot of money to take up the largest buildings in the big city for a week, right? So there's cost to this thing, and so there's probably some of it is just to get people from just coming in for free. But then there's also the idea that when we first started going to SHOT in 2005, it was airsoft. They were deathly afraid that digital pictures would get to Japan quickly, and they would have airsoft versions of their stuff hit market before their stuff hit market. And they definitely didn't want that happening. It had already happened. Additionally, there's real operators going to SHOT. SHOT Show is the industry trade show, so it's really designed for manufacturers who create stuff to go to a show with middlemen and then all the people who buy, the gun shops. And
but it's also designed for military and law enforcement.
Correct, very much so. So that, actually it started out though with just the military and law enforcement was brought on, but it started out to facilitate. If you're a manufacturer like Smith & Wesson, it's not possible for you to sell to each individual person. It's just too big a country and too many guns and too much regulation. So because of the regulation and because of the demand, they sell to wholesalers. They can't even really sell to gun shops. It's just there's too many gun shops at this point. So they'll make a deal with a wholesaler and they'll say, I'm going to sell this many pythons this year. And a wholesaler will say, well, we have this many gun shops that we represent. We'll be able to buy, let's say the numbers were 1,000. We're going to buy 700. That leaves 300 for somebody else. And then somebody buys 200, whatever it comes down to. Maybe some shop is so big or has such a reputation, they buy some directly. But for the most part, it's just to facilitate the distribution of all these firearms throughout the country and to give a gun shop owner hands-on. I want to see what these guns are. I need to get the catalogs. Back in the old days, that's where you got your catalogs for your shop. So it's really an industry show. But like Charles said, it all started in the 60s when there was multiple industry shows. And if you look at the origins of SHOT Show, a lot of the critique was, why do we need another one of these? We already have regional shows. Why do we need a national show? And that was the big question. Well, I think in demand, I'm not sure. I'd like to get people on who know the answers to this. But I suspect once it was popular as a national show instead of a regional show, they probably lost some interest and needed to bring the military stuff on to get some members back, some attendance back. Because you think of somebody like Colt. Or let's say Remington. It doesn't matter. You can actually pick any company. They pretty much make hunting guns, they make competition guns, they make military guns. If they've got to go to a hunting show and then a military show, what do they do with their competition guns? There's just a lot of work. So by doing a SHOT Show, I think they eliminated, or they made it much more efficient for everybody, like a Benchmade or a Spyderco, these companies that have interests in more than one firearms area of interest. So anyway, you get the military, and that's what I was getting at with the pictures, is as soon as you get military in there, you don't just get like recruits in there. It's not like you're coming from basic training to SHOT Show. These are the people whose job is to buy. They're consignment or they're acquisition guys. And often, if that's like, for boot camp, that's just some guy, some general or some sergeant or something. But if it's like a team, if it's a special op unit, then that's going to be a procurement guy who doesn't want to be known. A lot of times, guys that are deployed or they're doing stuff, they don't want their pictures out there for lots of reasons. So you didn't take pictures at SHOT Show because you didn't know if you had undercover police in there. You didn't know if you had legitimate, operatives who didn't need to be taken pictures of, or you didn't know what, or if you just had people who were not, who said they were sick that week, and there's pictures of them at SHOT Show. So for all these reasons, they didn't want any pictures of any crowds at SHOT Show, period. And you would get your credentials. I guess you didn't have to do it this as radio, but as pictures, man, we have to go through a lot. And I'm just putting together my pictures to try to illustrate this in a video later, hopefully before SHOT Show, that we had to bring paper. We had to have paper with us and pens because we didn't want, we had to make sure people could sign it. But if we had a person in a picture, we had to have a signed, whatever it's called, a release from them.
Right.
So
they actually asked me if I was going to be taking pictures because they were going to give me a certain type of a media pass that would have, even though I was in radio, would have allowed me to do it because I would have been putting pictures on my website along with what I did on radio, and they offered that to me.
Right.
Authorization to take pictures.
And then they'll have a level for broadcaster, they call it, which is like when the TV crews come in, because they do a whole nother level of hassle, I guess, where they wall off a booth and they'll get a person aside for whole booth aside for maybe half an hour while they record video. And that was a much bigger deal back when equipment was bigger, and it was just technically it was just TV or cameras. Now there's everything in between, so it's not even an issue. And that's sort of what I'm getting at. We've been kind of beating around the bush, but I just didn't even know that Charles had that same issue with getting his media credentials as we did, because we literally had the same conversation. It sounds like just a year or two, well, maybe 5 years later, when they questioned us about the website stuff. Because like I say, we were going to take pictures for ourselves and for the forums, because I guess what I didn't mention is nobody was taking pictures of AKs. Everybody was taking pictures of ARs and revolvers and dumb stuff, but it was the end of the assault weapons ban, 2005. The assault weapons ban ended in September of 2004. So when we went to SHOT Show in January, all I cared about is seeing AK-47s. So we would ask, what do you want to see? And we got I want to see this rail, I want to see this stock, I want to see these guns. I was just going through the pictures, probably 12 different manufacturers of AKs at SHOT Show that year. So we got to see all kinds of neat stuff, and I was the only one taking pictures of AKs. So anyway, so that's just happened to be my perspective on SHOT Shows. I started taking pictures for forums and others, just to be the monkey, like what Pink does now, just to be the person with the camera at the show for all the people out there that couldn't get there, and to show the stuff off that, just wasn't getting the pictures in the limelight. Again, in 2005, you had your cable TV channels that were going to feature stuff, but that was going to be who paid. Ruger paid them, so Smith & Wesson paid them. Somebody paid them to take those, stuff for TV. They don't just wander and take stuff randomly. So anyway, you get SHOT Show evolving from 2005 to now. It goes from pictures to digital. From regular cameras to digital. That was another thing. You could take a picture because they knew that you'd have to go home and develop it, and then in August it might come out in a magazine. When you take a 8 megapixel digital camera and they know it's going to be online tomorrow, they weren't so happy about that until about 2008. So anyway, we get through and you get to where they're nowadays, there's a section of their booth where they'll have a backdrop. It's designed to do interviews. They understand what streaming is. They understand what live video is. They understand a regular person can come up and look like me or just some guy and have 100-something thousand people that watch their videos on YouTube. And they understand the significance. Like Charles said, this is industry. This isn't like, let's all be in cahoots or nothing. This is all people trying to do business. And when, some entity that's established and has a lot of production costs says, hey, in order to get on our feed, we're going to be able to get you 1 million people, and it's going to cost you $100,000. And then some guy comes up and goes, hey, I can have this up in tomorrow afternoon. It'll look nice, and you'll have 500,000 people, and it'll cost you, let me do it. Say thanks to me, acknowledge that I exist. Like, that's a big difference. And it's got to be better, I think, for the industry, because they get immediate feedback. Instead of a picture going in a magazine or on a TV commercial, what kind of feedback can you possibly get from that? With collaboration with an individual, Charles even, let's say that Colt had something going with Charles, and Charles heard something and said something to Colt. Colt immediately knows what actually happened from an end user. I don't know, that's just a little sample, but anyway, so I see that, we've changed the industry. We, the audience and the individuals taking the pictures or listening to the stories, the press, and like I say, no one sat down in 2005 and said, in 2010, I want to make sure there's video. And in 2020, streaming. Right? In 2020, I want to make sure that we're going to have phones that can stream. Let's make sure SHOT Show and the industry are ready. None of that happened. You could make that point. 2020 hindsight, you could say that's exactly what happened. But no one knew that was going to happen. But we know that change is inevitable. And I'm going to give Charles a second to reflect on this. I'm going to try to gather my thoughts and come up with, Charles is always a good challenge for me to try to give my elevator speech well, but I've got a way that I'd like to explain what I'm trying to do for 2020 here. But let me take a second, take a drink of water. We are having a conversation here. Charles is jumped in. I've got links out there to 30, 40 people. We'll see if anybody else jumps in tonight. And of course, we got people watching us live. Their chat's up on the screen here. And but as far as what we've chatted about so far, Charles, do you think you get an idea what I'm talking about? Like we've we've influenced the show as media. We've influenced the show as the people who appreciate the content that's created at SHOT Show. Do you think we have a possibility to influence as well? Or do you think we have an obligation, or is it even our right to influence? Or should we as media only observe?
You mean the SHOT Show?
SHOT Show specifically, the industry or whatever, yeah.
Oh, no, I think for the most part, when it comes to society in general and specifically the SHOT Show, there are very few rules anymore. There are very few parameters. I mean, you can do and say anything. You can get, for instance, you can get away with saying a lot more stuff on radio than you ever could. Television has basically got nudity on it. I mean, there's really hardly any. You can't say the F word and the S word on radio, but other than that, you can do and say anything you want. So why would there be any rules about what you can and can't do to influence an industry?
I think more of a. No, I hear you. I think it's more of, I would think, who's that guy with the hat? Is it Dave Workman? That we always see at Conright's Policy, and he's actually a lot of places.
Very deep voice.
Yes, he's the author, and he's the. And I think, oh, you know what? I'm assuming Charles was upstairs working on the radio when I was down in the AmCon thing, but he had given us 2 years in a row now, maybe 3 years in a row now. The idea about journalism, and as journalists, your responsibility, and as opposed to, I forget what he calls the opposite of a journalist, but like an independent amateur who doesn't have I don't know what the word is, the respect for the truth, or the knowledge of what is journalistically ethical. Maybe it's the ethics of journalism. And I think that was his. I think it's kind of difficult. I don't like the guy that much, so I don't listen to him. But I think that's what he's trying to get across, is that when you get too many, because he's really against amateur journalism, from what I can tell. So I think he's pretty much concerned that as amateurs, if we're not like aware of like our responsibilities as journalists, that we can be doing things that are unethical. Yeah. So I guess what I was saying, like, I can understand that because I've already, like, I kind of alluded to it, but I'm not saying I'm the first guy to take pictures at SHOT Show at all. I'm not saying I'm the first guy from the internet. I followed the heels of Mil-Spec Monkey, who's the patch guy now. He was a massive photographer back in the day and still today. Excellent photographer. But Mil-Spec Monkey, Military Moron, and SNG Lee. These guys were they had awesome access. They were respected. They would go to SHOT Show and get the pictures. There's a couple other people I didn't follow because they were taking pictures of like the lever actions and the revolvers. But as far as the military guns that I liked and the CCW stuff, it was SNG Lee, Mil-Spec Monkey, and Military Moron. And I liked all those guys. You still don't know who they are. They only take pictures and they offered them to people. They weren't creating brands. Well, Mil-Spec Monkey has a brand. He's an exception. But the other guys are just individuals who had access and interest, and they offered. Like I say, I just was upset. Not upset. I was just frustrated that they didn't have focus on AK stuff. So I emulated them 100%. I didn't do anything other than what they did. I went to places and asked if I could take pictures. Never tried to interview. Never tried to do nothing. Just pictures and offer the pictures. And that's how I got my feet wet with it. So like I say, I'm not trying to say I've started nothing, but I've been around for a while. And I definitely remember in 2007, when Mil-Spec Monkey started going to video, in 2008, having to walk in the wake of Mil-Spec Monkey online and go, what am I not doing video for? So in 2009, when we went to SHOT in Florida, we bought a high-def camera at Best Buy and then took it back on Monday when we came back. Like, we owned it for 7 days or 6 days or whatever it was. Enough time to figure out how to use it, go to SHOT Show, and then returned it. So, I can remember in 2009 going to video, and now 2019 last year, again, having sections of the booth, which, depending on where you are at SHOT Show, that real estate costs you easily $20,000, and people are putting a third or a quarter of their booth devoted to having a backdrop, where there's no product, just a void area of their booth, designed for the videos because they understand how influential and necessary those things are. So with that in mind, going forward, I like to think that liberty requires eternal vigilance. With that premise, I know Charles and I can remember this from our youths, but we lived out here now, so we don't have to deal with it. Mowing the grass. That's your eternal vigilance, right? We all want liberty. We're all willing to offer eternal vigilance. But what does that mean? I think it's mowing the grass. I use that analogy a lot. You don't get a pat on the back. Nobody congratulates you. There's your own obligation. If you don't do it, nobody will really care for a while, right? After a while, your yard goes to poop. You get fined by the city or something. But for the most part, you have happy neighbors and you have a picnic once in a while. But for the most part, you just put a lot of effort into mowing your grass so that you can do it again next week, right? You spend effort, you buy lawn mowers, or you pay a kid to do it. You're putting effort and resources into it just to keep it accomplished. So I consider that to be liberty, or the eternal vigilance that required for liberty. So with that in mind, let's say you had a neighborhood, a community, where they had to mow the grass, and you sent out a postcard to them, and you asked each person with some intent, with a plan, to do something. You said, hey, could you mow your grass left to right, or up to down, or back and forth, or do a different pattern in your grass on next Saturday. And then let's say everybody obliged. Now you take one of them drones or something, you go up into the air, and you look down, and each one of those yards mowed in a different direction is going to look like a little different pixel, right? So all together, they spell out Epstein didn't kill himself or something, right? You create some kind of a thing. Now what do you accomplish there? Everybody had to do the same work anyway. Everybody was doing it for their own self-interest. Everybody does it because it needs to be done, and no one's looking to be congratulated. But with one little piece, you gave them a little bit of way to coordinate and to work together, right? And it didn't take a lot of effort. They just had to oblige. And what the results of that is you got a funny little meme, or you got a funny little picture. But what's the results of that? Now the next community over might say, oh, that's interesting, and they might emulate it. They might do something a little different. They might grow their roses differently to spell out Epstein didn't kill himself or whatever, right? But maybe somebody goes the next step and says, that's all neat, but what if we said everybody mowed the lawn at 7 a.m.? So now they can put a drone up there with video, and now the yards go from haphazard to mowed, and they spell it out in video, so people can be creative and evolve. What does it take? It takes somebody with the insight to think about to do it, and then some evolution of it. So that's my concept, is if we can talk to put this in real life, if we can talk to the media, the people that go to SHOT Show to be a mirror or a window, and ask them what would happen if each of us with cameras and microphones and typewriters, I shouldn't say that, keyboards, microphones and cameras, phones, what if we each asked at the end of our interviews, which gun owners' rights group do you support? Which gun owners' rights group do you support? Saying it the way that Alan Cornwood would say it. A gun owners' rights group. It's not a gun rights group, right? It's a gun owners' rights group. Enunciating that point, or something to the effect of which gun prohibitionist, blah, blah, blah. So if we could, with just a simple piece of our video, our interview, our whatever piece of work we create from the shot, if we put that little seed out there, what would the industry do next year? Would they have banners up on their thing? Would they be proud of the gun owners' rights groups that they support? With stuff like the NRA in the situation it's in, with Virginia in the situation it's in, where we've already had Washington, Oregon, California, Nevada, Massachusetts, Rhode Island, Connecticut, all these states already fell. Now Virginia is griping, and everybody's acting like it's the newest thing on the block. Pennsylvania had 26 or 60 gun bills go down their throat, and nobody blinked an eye. So when are we going to start to work together? When are we going to be aware of the states' rights groups that do all the important work? And how do we get the focus from none to that? And I think that, I don't know how to go from the idea to getting the postcard written. I don't know if that's a good elevator speech or if I rambled too much. Does that get the point across?
Not to me, not in my way of looking at things.
Oh, okay.
If you're asking my honest opinion, no. You need to be able to truly get an elevator speech down to about 60 seconds in order for it to be truly an elevator speech. And what I would say is we got to figure out a way so that people can network together to effectively kill any form of gun control. That would be my elevator speech.
Well, okay, but that's how many years do I have to do that and have failed before I give up on that? That though,
Well, the trick is you never give up.
I
So
can't. I
you're
don't
not
have ultimate
defeated.
resources though.
Yeah, but your ultimate resource is your own determination. You're never defeated unless you quit. As long as you keep innovating, as long as you keep in the fight, that is how you win. Because the other side's going to do the exact polar opposite. So you might as well do what they're doing, only just simply be persistent, never quit, and do it better.
Yep. All right. Well, so I asked for an answer and you gave me one. That was my thing. So I don't know what else.
Not what you wanted to hear, not necessarily what you wanted to hear, but you
No, I
asked.
don't need to hear what I need to hear. I mean, yeah, you're right. It's not what I wanted to hear, but I don't care. I mean, what the hell? I don't
Right,
expect you to sugarcoat nothing. And whatever, you don't
right.
listen to every
I
single
know.
thing I do. So it's not like, you know what I'm saying? It's not like we're even talking too much the same language. But as far as what have we watched change as 2A media, and then what can we change? So again, I don't know if you've paid attention to Ken Blanchard, but he's
Well, I know
retired.
who he is, but I don't know that I've paid
Well, he's
that close.
retired this. He retired last year. He stepped down from a Second Amendment advocacy.
Oh, I didn't
Suggests
know that.
his idea was, or his explanation is his goodbye speech was, in a nutshell, most 2A activists either die or do something dumb. Like, you can, whatever, that usually there's those two things. You either die or you do something that puts your foot in your mouth and you're no longer taken with any credibility as an activist, or you're no longer a benefit to the cause, right? So instead
Yeah.
of having either one of those things happen, I guess he wanted to bow out gracefully. So he stepped down as a 2A activist.
Okay.
So with that in mind, I'm not going to live forever. So, and again, yeah, I don't have ultimate resources, but I also have to look forward, and I don't have any kind of anything. So I have to. I can't go forever. So anyway, I have to check out too. So I'll be checking out as a 2A activist. So what you say, never give up, would be awesome. I'd love to be able to never give up. But that's not reasonable. So what I can do is offer something, and hopefully it's not a whisper, but offer something on the way out. So,
Well,
like I say, I'm not asking for a pat on the
I
back that
kind of
everything's
like Charlton
perfect.
Heston's theory. You can take my activism from my cold dead fingers, to paraphrase what Heston said. Of course, he did it with a flintlock, but uh, I just think you don't ever quit and you persist. And I think another thing we can do is teach the technology of not caring what other people think of us. Too many of us in our society today are invested in the opinions, or too heavily invested, I'll say, in the opinions of others. Why not keep your own counsel as to what you think is good and bad, and not worry about what anyone else thinks of what you do or say, provided, of course, you don't do anything immoral, like steal or steal from others or cause damage or engage in force or fraud. As long as you're not doing those things, why the hell care what other people think of your efforts or of the way you do things?
Yeah, I can't say I can't say that that's a fault that I've seen on like many people. That's an individual thing that some people have, some people don't, I think.
Yeah, but what I'm talking about is coming up with ways to teach to others so that they don't care. Teach others, teach new people coming up so that they don't get too invested in the opinions of others.
Yeah, it's like I say, I've never focused on that negative aspect to try to think about coaching. What I'm looking to do is to offer insight or whatever, but as far as that's more like therapy or something, like how to, right?
Okay.
Well, I mean, seriously, like I don't know how to even imagine how many people have that issue versus where it comes from and how you would address it. I mean, that's all got to be inside, right? That's got to be like a want to change and an interest to change and attempts to change. Like that's none of that has anything to do with guns, really. But
It has
I
to do with your
understand.
attitude about staying an activist is what I'm referring to.
Yeah, see, I can't even. I'm not even looking to bring new activists on. I'm looking at it pragmatically. I'm a old man, right? And I've got my old experiences, and I've got a potential audience of people that want to listen to an old dude. And I'm just using old dude as a generalization of everything that I am. Everybody else is different, but what I can tell you is my parents' generation is checking out. This
Right.
2020 national election, they have 20% or so influence. They're giving it to, they're giving their 20% influence in the national elections to Generation Y or Z or whatever it is, the kids that have not ever voted in a presidential election yet. This will be their first one. They've all been born since 2000. So they've never known a life without a smartphone. They've never known a life without video on demand. They don't know what video stores are or anything like that. They've just watched any type of content they've ever wanted immediately. They have an ultimate awareness and probably ability to reclaim stuff off the internet. I can't imagine their abilities, and they've basically just been told what they are for the last 18 years, and they're about to actually exercise that. I have ultimate faith in them. From some of the Pro 2A kids that I've seen, I'm calling kids, that I've seen, I have ultimate confidence in them. But I think pragmatically, I'm not bringing new people on board. I might be able to offer some awareness and I might be able to offer some information, but I'm no longer offering inspiration to anybody that I'm aware of. So yeah, I'm checking out. There's nothing I can do as an activist to bring people on board or to counsel them on how to be an activist or why. I can offer them information on how it went, what history is, or where we are. But I have efforted for since 2013 to bring people together, and it's just not possible. At least I haven't found a way to do it.
Well, I think the only way you can bring people together is through organizations. I don't think you can do it on an individual basis. I've advocated against it for a long time. I think that
Well, tell me about it.
you have to work through. Pardon me?
Tell me about it. Yeah, I hear you.
I think what has to be done is you have to encourage people to a vision, and that vision is executed through a group. That's why I participated in the starting of the Arizona Citizens Defense League, and why I tried to help JPFO for a long time, and still to some extent do help JPFO as their communications coordinator, just like I do for AZCDL. What I tried to do was I tried to form people to act into a group that would be affiliated in such a way as to to produce a result of more freedom.
Right on. I understand what you're saying, and I can't say I'm only going to offer this. When I went to, I'm pretty sure it was gun rights policy this year, but it could have been Chicago. And I forget who it was, but somebody, man, I was having a conversation about. It might have been. I don't think it was you. But it's all bleeding together. But the gist of it was that that lobbyists are going to see things as lobbyists, and
Right.
that struck a chord for me, and it started to make me look again at us and put us in different bubbles or different group us in different ways. And there's definitely those who are into grassroots, and there's those that are into boots on the ground, because I think those are different. There's those that are into like preliminary, let's get the ball rolling and let's get people organized. Then there's people that are into let's ballot petition, right? I guess that's very similar, but then get out the word to vote, 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 vote. There's a couple of people that think White House petitions are valid. Then there's people that are let's get this Supreme Court. Let's get this the Supreme Court. Let's So there's the lobbyist side, and then there's the, what is it called when you go to the courts? Legislation side. Like let's say you have bad gun law.
Litigation.
Litigation. Thank you. So there's these. It's kind of like that whole. You got a hammer. You're looking at nails. And I started to think about that. There's, like you just put it, there's the individual or the whatever you said versus the organization, and that's definitely a centricity. Like that's a preference that people have. And honestly, you're an organization type. You come from an older generation than me, a little bit older generation than me, where you're used to being in organizations and clubs, and the traditions and all that stuff means stuff. You understand it. I understand that you understand it, but I understand that I have less of it. I mean, it's my generation, right? And I know that the new generations almost have a vile disregard. They hate it. I don't know if you're paying attention to what's going on with the NRA and the reactions and stuff, or how you'd
Yeah,
characterize
I'm paying
that, but
attention. Yeah.
there's some animosity is a nice word, but there's people that will resist anything about organizations, and then there's the whole spectrum in between. So I hear what you're saying. I don't agree though, and I'm not going to say I don't agree because this is better, but I'll disagree because I've been efforting since 2012 when I steered my channel from doing gun reviews and being a window to the industry to being a magnifying glass and looking at aspects of the industry. And after a while, I figured out that we're not going to, no, there is no strategy that's going to win. I believe it's going to require a whole bunch of strategies, a whole bunch of people pitching in, and a bunch of awareness. So after 15, when I went to the Gun Rights Policy Conference, thanks to your urging, and then being more active with AZCDL, and unfortunately the failures there, and with Florida Carry, worse failures there. Every Second Matters, my own project, which was a result of my failures with AZCDL and Florida Carry, failures there. I'm not saying that I'm a failure. I mean, hell, I've succeeded all the damn time during this time. I'm still kicking, and I'm still kicking in a way that most people ain't going to be able to deal with it. Like I know I'm not a failure, but projects have failed all the damn time. I learn from them and I keep going. But I'm not an idiot, and I'm not deranged where I'm so optimistic that I'm gonna run my knees into the ground.
With overactivism.
Well, with unawareness, I'm aware, and I've tried lots and lots of things, and I keep smiling, and I keep taking all kinds of shit, waiting for people to do something. But again, I got holes in roofs, and I've got bills due, and I've gone into tens of thousands of dollars of debt. I only have so much before I got to go work for another. I want to say the name, but I'm not going to say it live. Another attorney, and make some actual money. I got to go work for a pizza place or something where I can just go make money, where I don't have any passion or interest in the results of what I do. But I can't do it because I can't get people. You can't herd kittens. You can't make people give a shit. You can't give people insight. All you can do is give them information. So that's where I'm coming from. That I hear what you're saying, but I'm not saying that you're just saying it as a platitude. But I can't. I've done it. I've done lots and lots and lots of iterations of it. And I think that at some point we've all got a lifespan, and mine is done. If I should have been inspiring people what I'm doing now in 2007. If I had known what I know now in 7, I could have had 200 people like me on board instead of bringing a bunch of people like I was in 97 on board, or in 2007 on board.
And as Chief Engineer Scott said, if my grandmother had wheels, I'd be a wagon. You know, there's no sense beating yourself up over what you haven't done.
Oh, I don't beat myself up. I'm just trying to say I'm realistic. I'm not going to go forward unaware just because I'd like it to be some way. What's that called? Right?
Say that again?
Just continuing on like a crazy, wanting it to be this way, understanding the whole time that no one's going along. Like, no, I'm not. I haven't been doing the same thing. I've been doing different things. It's just that I'm running out of resources. So at some point, what's the advantage? What's the strategy to have your players grind themselves out? I mean, if you need oil on the tools, you oil the tools. If the tool is worn out, you replace it with a sharp tool. You don't just leave the tool there because of tradition and have it be ineffective. I'm not effective as an organizer, and I'm not effective as a inspiration. So I'm going to just do what I am good at, offering information. But I guess the thing is, we're two old people looking at it from 2020 hindsight. 2020, we're looking at it from hindsight. What we need is some young ones in here. If we had young kids in here, they could give us maybe some, something, another side of this. Because I'm not trying to. I don't know. I was trying to ask the question to a whole bunch of generations or a whole bunch of different experiences. But you and I have very, I think, similar experiences as far as SHOT Show.
Well, I don't think that you need. I don't think that you need to set the world on fire individually. First of all, number one, in terms of running out of resources, I don't know if you listen to the stuff that Dave Ramsey talks about is, getting your life together to the point of where money's no longer an issue. And then you can do what you want. You can retire. You can continue to work. You can work for what pleases you. I don't know if you follow his stuff at all about financial peace, but one of the things he talks about is getting your house in order so that you live for a long time like nobody else lives, so that you can later on, so you can live like and give like nobody else.
Yeah, that's awesome. Except I live like nobody else lives and give at the same time. So I don't save, I don't store
Right,
anything.
I know, and that's what he inveighs against doing. Is you
Yeah,
first
no
set
doubt.
up you first build your own nest, and then you go out and help other people build their activism.
So let's say in 2005, when you're just minding your business, sitting around one day, and you start building this nest, you don't realize. Yeah, that's the problem.
Well, right, but once you do realize that, you change what you're doing.
Yeah, bingo. 2020, I'm changing what I'm doing.
There you go.
Yeah, I could
Okay.
say. I mean, I believe that's a whole nother discussion. I'm not even here to talk about my things. I mean, that wasn't really it's kind of turned into that. But as let's because who cares what my things are. Let's look at the industry and the media, because that's what matters. 2A media, and going forward into 2020, what we've got is traditional media, and all the stuff that I don't think it's going anywhere anymore. Stuff shifted quite a bit. What probably in the early 2000s there, when everybody thought everything was going to go to the internet. So I think it's shifted quite a bit, gone back and forth a little bit, settled. Magazines aren't going anywhere. Radio's not going anywhere. Television, we'll see. But internet obviously is growing, and its biggest fight is with television more than anything. But the physical mediums, the radio and the magazines, are still going to exist for what they are. So that means you've got new players too. Because I don't know. Would you count podcasts as radio, or do you separate them?
No, it's separate. It's not a radio's or podcast is not radio unless it's a radio show that also is made into a podcast.
Mm-hmm. And so that's where, like I say, there's those that aren't going anywhere, because there's always gonna, as long as we've got ears, right, we're gonna be and doing things that preoccupy our hands or whatever, our eyes. We're gonna have those mediums, and so once we've figured that out, you got your access to. So I think that's the big difference between a podcast and a radio show, is that a radio show requires all that resource and production, where podcasts, I'm doing a podcast right now in my house with a computer, and that's it.
Well, there's not that much difference in resource allocation between a radio show and a podcast. I mean, really, a computer, a microphone, a decent room, and some editing software is basically all you need for a radio show.
Well, okay, I guess technically, but that's like saying all you need for a human is, this amount of elements and, some put them together. So there's more to it. You have to have consistency. You got to have something to talk about that brings people back week after week, and then you have to have the business side of it. If you're just delusional and think you can do it for the love of doing it, that ain't going to happen on a radio show, right? You need to pay for your way. The time involved.
You have to have some infrastructure to what goes on. You got to figure out a way to be able to either pay for it or get paid for it, one or the other.
Yeah, and then you've got other obligations. If I were to play like that intro music, I could play that intro music. If you play it, maybe as the radio, that's one thing. But if you were to play something you weren't licensed for, there's different obligations and stuff.
Different problems that come up from it.
And then if we take that and we parallel it over to the print, you've got similar. You've got your ebooks, print on demand. Anybody can write a book, and it can be printed and look nice, and you don't have to put any money into it anymore. It's just time. But then you've got books that are good and need to be printed and blah blah blah. Stuff that needs to be said or stuff that needs to be written down. The ballistics table, stuff like that is valid to have in print. So that stuff's not going anywhere. So I just see the media as, I don't know. We don't know, because we don't know what the next tech is going to be. We don't know what the next, whatever this 5G or whatever is going to end up doing. But look at what's happened from old clunky cell phones to smartphones. I mean, it's amazing. So who knows what the next amazing step is going to be or when it's going to happen. But until then, I think we're pretty safe to say that things have kind of settled and shifted. So where we're at now is basically I think everything times two. Back in the day, SHOT Show, when it started, you scroll down the list here, 89?
I don't know.
79. It started in 79. You had your print, you had your microphones, and you had your typewriters. And now you've got, like I would say, all of that times two, because you've got your pro and your professional and your semi-professional. And I guess that's where the real question comes from for the show today was, are we going to, do we continue to just be window, or do we influence? Do we attempt to understand that we can do stuff, but like you say, how do you get people to walk in step or to understand that that's a thing? How do you get them to understand that if everyone cut the lawn the same way, something else could be accomplished at the same time? How do you break that wall or that fourth wall?
That's an eternal question there.
I suppose.
I don't know. How do you do that?
But that's why I like to have discussions like this, try to get people's insight on it, or attempt to. So we've been going for an hour. I appreciate it, Charles. I know that even though it's not that late for us compared to the people on the East Coast, it's still getting late for your gig. So are you going to SHOT this year?
It is, and I gotta be up at 6.
Are you going to SHOT this year?
No, hell no.
When-
No, I don't. I pretty much. I try not to travel very much. So.
Yeah, it's one of those things. I'll ask Charles. For years, I assumed Charles would be there, and then I think maybe I missed you one year, and then I asked you, and you're like, oh, I wasn't even there, and then I would ask, and every once in a while you're up there, and then sometimes I'll just see out of nowhere when I forgot to ask you or whatever. So.
Right. Well, I went for JPFO, and it was pretty productive, and in terms of the things that I got accomplished for the organization. But by the same token, I mean, it's just too much walking around for me, and number one. And number two is that I'm not sure how much I could accomplish at SHOT that I couldn't accomplish on the phone or the internet.
No, that's a big part, and that's one of the things that frustrates me so much. And this is getting off in a whole other tangent, but I don't care about SHOT Show one way or the other. It just happens to be in Vegas, and I can get to it. But if I was close to one of the other shows, I'd probably be really into that show, right? But I am really close to it, and I've been going to it for 15 years. And like I say, I'm not in here to get paid or to get laid. I'm not trying to get famous, right? I just really enjoy firearms. I enjoy the community a lot. The people are good people. But
Yeah.
I really want to have a tiny little 1918, right? I want a little tiny Ma Deuce that shoots 22 short, belt fed, a little fabric belt that Tippmann used to make. And I don't want to pay no $75,000 for that thing. And I want a couple of them, right? And that means no NFA. So I'm greedy. I just want no NFA. So how do you get no NFA? You don't do it by forcing nobody. You gotta get people aware. So when I figured out that I'm not going to be, that I was doing SHOT Show for a while there, and I figured out I'm not trying to be the best or the biggest or the first or any of that. So I tried that a couple of times and it was fun, but that wasn't my thing. As I figured out, I know a lot of people, and I started working with organizations, and I was like, wow, organizations have done tremendous things, and I don't know how they get their shit together, because they can't talk their way out of a fucking bag. They're not good. Like, they don't know the internet, they don't know this. We started seeing, we started getting paid a lot of money. It's an embarrassing amount of money there for a little while on YouTube. And that's when we all thought that the new media was just going to take over, because nobody could compete. But that turns, there's always bubbles, and there's whatever you want to call it,
Right.
like, the after the 2020 hindsight, because we're in 2020. I'm looking for 2020 puns. So I've only heard a couple good ones so far. But, after the waves or whatever of coming and going and seeing, there's no heroes. There's no perfect way to do this. The only thing we can possibly do is work together. The only thing we can possibly do is appreciate each other. The only thing we can possibly do is understand and be aware. This isn't going to be taken care of. This isn't a done job. There's no finish to this. This isn't like accomplished, right? This is, we all got to figure out that it's mowing the lawn, yeah. And like, hey, if you want to for a while, if you want to compare lawnmowers and that gets you motivated, go for it, And if you get sick of that and you start paying a kid, who cares? Like, let's get it done. So that's where I'm just trying to keep the conversation going, keep people contacting each other so that we can eventually finish this. or at least get us to the next level where it's a coast again, I really look back to 95. And that would be a great conversation to have sometime when you're game, because you were much more aware back then than I am. But let's get some old folks in here and talk about what it was like to live in the United States in 1995. So used to saying 2000. But the repercussions, the consequences that assault weapons ban. If we could figure out how to get the essence of what happened in 95 and amplify that with what happened in 13, I want to live in that 10 years. I want my 10 years of retirement to be like that, right? So anyway, so that's what I'm looking at, is we've got, potential to influence. I think we just need to figure out a way to, like you say, get to people who aren't, I don't know, delusional and maybe
to find the people who are, as they say now, woke.
Yeah, no, seriously, it's the people that aren't ingrained, right? What's the word for somebody who just will not, they only have their one way of doing it, concrete minded or something?
Yeah, something like that.
Or like you say, let those people.
Intractable.
Okay, perfect. And, and just keep the ball moving. So
Yeah.
anyhow, so I appreciate everybody jumping in and being part of this. Let's see, Charles has a show on Sundays. Anything coming up? Do you want to plug?
Well, I have on at 11 o'clock Pacific time, I have a fellow on from Illinois by the name of Stephen, I'll think of his last name in a minute. He's a researcher and a scientist. He's an engineer, and he talks about the lack of evidence for man-caused global warming. Stephen, gosh, I can't think of his name. Anyways, fascinating guy, very well spoken, and he's a repeat guest. And the mad world of climatism is one of his books. I forget the other one, but anyway, Stephen. I'll think of it later.
Think of it when you're not trying to think of it, exactly.
But yeah, when I'm not trying to think of it, it'll come to me. But the point, Gorham is his name, Stephen Gorham, and he's a pretty interesting guy and a good guest. And then at 12 o'clock on 12 o'clock Mountain Time, you can listen live if you're not in Tucson. Liberty Watch Radio. Start over again. KVOI.com. Again, KVOI.com. And click Listen Live, and you can listen anywhere in the world live to the program. And if you want to catch the archive, it's LibertyWatchRadio.com, and then click on the Recent Shows tab, and you will find the last 6 months of the program. Tonight I was working on trying to archive yesterday's program, and I haven't finished doing it yet, so I still got to get to a little bit of that and then get to bed. But anyway, that's what I do. That's who I am. Charles at Liberty Watch Radio. If anybody wants to get in touch with me, again, Charles at LibertyWatchRadio.com.
Right on. Thanks.
Thank you for doing it.
I just watched, when you're talking about climate change, I watched a thing on, I think it's from History Channel. They called it The History of Time in 2 Hours. If you happen to see this thing ever. And it's sort of imagine if they took a whole bunch of History Channel shows and just chopped them all up and re-edited them into The History of Time in 2 hours. So it starts with, Big Bang or whatever, and then goes up to today. So the gist of it is, if the whole span of time is 14 years, we've been here for 3 minutes. The Earth's been here for 5 years or something. So, yeah, it's really difficult to keep. What's the word for when you got the idea that, guns are so bad, only the police should have them. Trump is so bad, you give all your guns to Trump. Like, they don't. There's these logic circles that they don't quite fall into. So I understand the frustration when they want to use environment changes as cause for all the craziness, but
for alarmism. Pete, I gotta sign off. I'm falling over.
Yeah, right on. Thanks again for jumping in. It's a real treat.
Yeah,
Good to have you in. So there we go. Charles jumping out, and we wore him out. I think it's about an hour in. So I guess nobody else is jumping in. People have been pretty quiet. Looks like the last chat was from Bishop there, and about quarter hour ago, 15 minutes ago. So thanks for joining us. That was a conversation with Charles, and I'll continue to try to have these conversations with people that are going to SHOT Show, because because yeah, nobody's going to win this, and we kind of talked about it at the end there. There's people that aren't going to go because they don't think it's worth it and they don't need to go. And then what happens? The industry doesn't get together. So I don't want to see that happen. I think it's a worthwhile show, and I think there's a lot more to mine out of the industry getting together than we've bothered to harvest or mine from it yet. Anybody's going to say anything else out there? Otherwise, I guess we'll end it. So that was another 40-something people invited. Nobody jumped in. 17 people are watching it. Got 12 thumbs. Appreciate it. I want to thank our patrons. Those are the people that make it possible for us to do this show. We've introduced them a little bit in the video that we wrapped up last year with, but we'll be attempting to do that more in future videos here. And yeah, we'll be retuning this show to offer information and yeah, right on. So Bishops, do I have your address? If you would email me your address, a shipping address. And with that, I will quit narrow casting it, as Charles would say, and we will end it.